Hey everybody, my name is Dan Ulloa, and welcome to the Heady Chronicle show here. I am also the editor and publisher of Heady NJ, where we cover community news here in Jersey about cannabis politics, business, and culture. So, I'm trying to be expand a little bit, go out of my comfort zone as a writer, try a video here, be a showman with a hat. We got a set. I got this thing called Riverside now to accompany people like these things. And we have a good guest here. Very excited to introduce to here former High Times editor and CelebStoner publisher Steve Bloom. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, so I think you have like such a great background here, and I've really been like at like the forefront of this wild thing that like I'm trying to do or like been trying to do or cover for like a while now. So it's like really interesting to see and like all your experience because you've done like not only high times as like a writer, on the business side a little maybe. You have your own thing as a publisher. You're definitely on the business side that way and understand that. And you didn't like the New York City rally, I guess protest the annual protest, and like so many stories with like Tommy Chong and like all the famous celebrities that like smoke weed probably know you, and you've met most of them.
A few.
Oh, so modest here.
You tell me. Ask me what you want to know.
Yeah, so like what was like so yeah, so what was like some of the highlights? I guess you got started at High Times. You were like a music guy. I remember you saying, "Tell us about yourself that way."
Well, I got to High Times in 1988. I'm a music journalist by trade. Started my career in the late 70s. I did about 10 years of freelancing before I ended up at High Times. I did a few other jobs during that period, a couple of editing jobs because I'm also an editor. Basically, multiple hats as a writer, editor, author. So I've written some books like the one over there. My career took a turn, as kind of like, you cover beats. I know you do other work than just cannabis, and it was a new beat. I got invited to work up at High Times by a friend of mine who was an editor there. He started by giving me a few news assignments, and then brought me up to do proofreading, and just familiarize myself with the magazine, which I didn't really know very well. I was a marijuana user going back to when I was 15 in the early 70s, but I really wasn't an activist. New York was decriminalized, in the mid 70s. And, there was a movement here, the cannabis parade and all that, but I really didn't participate in that much at all. New York was pretty lenient in those years, even though it was illegal, decrim made it pretty lenient. And, prior to having, Republican mayors, Giuliani and Bloomberg, it was pretty damn hard to get arrested for weed in New York. Growing up in the 70s here, very permissive, but things changed dramatically. But anyway, I ended up at High Times in '88, right in the middle of the drug war. And my job there was not music journalist or music editor. I was news editor. My first job at High Times was news editor. It was a part-time job. I still was freelancing. I was writing for Rolling Stone and USA Today and other publications doing music stuff. And this job kind of dropped in my lap. And I guess I decided to go for it and stop my freelancing and dive into High Times. But it started as a part-time, and then after a couple of years it became a full-time, and I was reappointed to music editor, entertainment, a variety of things. So that kind of steered me a little bit away from the news. But the news was really good because I didn't really know much about the subject. Like I said, I was a pothead, but I didn't know how many people were getting arrested. I did not know who were the major players. I did not know anything about the laws, pretty much. And so I really had to dive in and learn it all and put together an 8-page section, every once a month. So I come into the office 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And then gradually they brought me in on a full-time basis and steered me more towards the music stuff. So that's where, I kind of blossomed at High Times because I do have good relations in the music industry, do have good contacts, and was able to, and I know how to handle the publicists. And the door swung open when a publicist called us about a new band called Cypress Hill in 1991, and we jumped that, and it was unusual for High Times to put a band on the cover that most people never heard of, but it was a really cool cover, and it did well, and we continued to do music stuff straight through the 90s, released the music issue one a year, and a lot of music coverage. and we started, Snoop Dogg, Willie Nelson, people like that on the cover, and also build a bridge to the hip hop community. The whole legalization movement was pretty white back then, and hip hop, sort of was a great opportunity to kind of reach across. And with the hip hop artists, appearing in High Times, that would bring in, a different audience. So I was in the middle of all that back then, and so I spent 20 years at High Times. I had multiple jobs. I rose up to editor, and then then I left and moved on to other things. Started CelebStoner right in the heels of leaving High Times. Weren't too many websites out there. A friend of mine said when I was leaving High Times, I was trying to figure out what am I going to do next, and she said, "Well, you should start a blog." And I said to her, "What's a blog?" That was 2006, and I figured it out, and I started a Blogspot blog, and it was very rudimentary, and kind of figured out coding and how to place photos and things like that, really basic stuff. And that's helped me in the long run because I understand coding a little bit on my CelebStoner website. But things got a lot easier when I brought in webmasters, and they brought in, content management systems that worked. And so coming out of High Times, it was like, what am I doing next? And, I did decide to create CelebStoner. And by, I think, 2007, 2008, the website started really cooking. And I looked at CelebStoner as a TMZ for weed, just kind of covering busts. There were a lot of marijuana celebrity busts back then. Snoop Dogg seemed to be getting arrested every other month. Willie Nelson, all kinds of people were falling into the trap of like a tour bus on the road that gets pulled over by the cops. Next thing you know, a lot of people are getting busted. Melissa Etheridge, that happened to. So yeah, started covering that, like a kind of like that sort of tabloidy approach. But then I kind of expanded way beyond arrests and stuff to culture, music, movies, celebrity, politics, activism, sports. It's kind of create a niche for myself, and nobody has ever really come along and actually challenged that niche. I'm really surprised. I mean, High Times does that sort of culture coverage, but it's not their main thing. And a lot of people bite off some of the celebrity stuff, but nobody's really challenged CelebStoner. I'm kind of surprised. I kind of have.
Oh, well, you're preeminent. That's the thing. Is like if you start so early and like such early stories about like, oh, New York before like stop and frisk. Oh my God, stop and frisk was like a thing under Giuliani Bloomberg for
Right.
what 20 fucking years or something. I guess under Dinkins and before, you could be like chill. I guess I'd catch.
It was. But things change. I mean,
Who else was?
I got arrested during those years too. During the 20 years of New York being the marijuana arrest capital of the world, 600,000 arrests over a 20-year period, 50,000 per year, when it peaked either under both Bloomberg and Giuliani, they both had 50,000 year arrests, 50,000 arrest years. Yeah, I fell into that in like 2012, just before Bloomberg was on his way out and de Blasio was on his way in. I got busted in a parking garage outside Madison Square Garden, ready to go to a Fish show. Me and a friend had come down from New Hampshire with tickets, and we smoked a little in the vehicle on the way down, pulled into a parking lot, and were surrounded by 5 cops who were staking out that parking lot for concert goers who smoked weed. And we fell into their net and missed that show that night, had to deal with a lot of legal bullshit, and so I've been through it. I've been arrested in New Jersey for weed twice, so I've been arrested 3 times for weed in my life. And that's what makes you an activist, by the way, when they put you in jail or they threaten your life that way. You'll become an activist after that, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely like stories like that. Like I may or may not have been arrested twice that way, and like had to deal with like a lot of bullshit that fucking way. Christina Giovanni, I think, did that too. Of Emerald magazine was like saying like this is bullshit. Now we have to have a magazine to like fight this shit. So yeah, no, it is like intense that way. But right then, like it's always interesting to see like the generations of like activists and like people like in the industry like inspire everybody, and like all these like head stories about like going like back in the day with like High Times was really like an institution, but like by the time I really got into this, like it had fallen apart. Like Tom Prasad, like Agents of Chaos book, his stories. I have that book that came out. It was like really great, and like that was like the Bible then, and it was funny. Like I remember, like even like the stigma being so embedded, being like, "Oh, my friends, like, oh, I got this High Times. It talks all about the indica and sativa, this beautiful plant." I'm like, "Oh, you fucking stoner."
Hey, shout out to Sean Hayes, who wrote a really great book. It's a really deep dive. I mean, that book is not just about High Times, it's about the radical politics of the 60s, the yippies,
Oh yeah,
the Weather Underground, really heavy shit, and actually does not paint High Times in a great picture. Tom Forssad is not painted well in that story. Tom Forssad is perceived as kind of a bit of a lunatic, and maybe he
Well, he
was.
was mentally ill. He did kill himself, but
Yeah,
then he was fucking
exactly.
brilliant
Right.
too, which is
Maybe he
too
was.
bad.
Maybe he was. But I wasn't there for that. So, and by the way, there's a feature on Tom Forssad and High Times coming up on 420 that Hulu is producing, and it's a package of 4 shorts, and one of them is about High Times. I'm aware of that because I was at a photo shoot for that, and they've been in touch with me for like.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I saw that. Jimmy Kimmel is
That's
involved,
right.
isn't he?
Yeah, there's 4 pieces they're doing, and one is the one on High Times. It'll probably be a 15-minute piece or something. So people learn a little bit more about the mysterious roots of High Times, which goes back to Forssad the smuggler, who didn't even use his name in the masthead, called himself something Morrison, Leslie Morrison, and hid behind a shroud of I mean, wore this weird like reverend preacher type clothes and stuff. I mean, it's a weird character. I mean, he fired everybody one time, because he was just so off the wall. I mean, he was pissed off about something and fired the whole office one day and brought them all back the next day. Like Hunter Thompson-esque kind of craziness.
Oh, another hero of mine. I got his
Right,
fist with two thumbs up on the wall, and the little Ralph Steadman art that looks all
right.
funny.
Who doesn't love Hunter? Especially in our community, one of the great heroes. And certainly for me as a writer, before all the weed stuff and High Times for me, just reading Fear and Loathing, back in '71, that just blew my
Oh,
mind.
nice.
You wanted to write like him. And, kind of my thing back then was who was I influenced by? Hunter Thompson, Jack Kerouac, on the road type stories. And I did a bunch of that after college or even during college when the summers traveled all over the country. I had kind of a traveling period from 72 to 76. Saw a lot of the country, went to Mexico and South, toured around, thought I was Jack Kerouac.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I never got like cross country. I've definitely been like a lot of places, like out in the Midwest, for example, the South, New England,
I've
for
hit, I've hit,
example.
I've hit probably 45, 48 states. Man, I haven't been to Alaska, North Dakota. Uh, Very few. I think I missed Oklahoma. I've been pretty much all over the
Oh,
country.
Oklahoma's a hella big in cannabis. I hear there's so many things going out there. They're like cowboys with the medical out there.
Well,
Been to the
that's
crackdown.
so surprising because that was the most conservative state at one point in the country when it came to cannabis. They had somebody locked up for 90 years for a joint.
Jesus.
But Idaho, I think, has replaced Oklahoma as the worst state, for cannabis. They have no laws that protect
Oh,
anything.
Idaho, yeah.
As a matter of fact, our friend Dana Beal is currently locked up in Idaho. So,
Oh yeah, that's difficult. Dana Beers is a hella radical, and it was kind of like an honor to meet this guy. And like, this is how this movement like gets sustained. It's like radical hippie from the '70s that like I met at like when they were trying to form like the New York Cannabis Industry Association, I think it
mhm,
was. And like this guy has been at it. He's in the book. He knew Prasad. He knew like all those people,
right,
like the famous leftist Tom Hayden, etc.
right,
It's like crazy. So then it's so interesting to see like the movement. That's the thing. Is like everyone in cannabis is really just doing their own thing. You started like in music, concerts. I've always been like political that way. Writing about politics, being in politics. Not as crazy as and radical and as national as Prasad, we definitely had like a lot of like adventures on like a lot of like economic issues, democratic campaigns. But this is more fun now. So here we are, and it's so interesting
and I
hearing about these stories and like the nature of it, and like where we were at one point. At the lows, some of the highs, and then like we're here in this wild, unprecedented land, the hippie dream. 300 dispensaries in Jersey. There's almost so many. I can't go to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I try to bring the fun, by being a music person, like conference and stuff like that. Try and make it fun. When I do like interviews with people, provide audio and video, make it fun. It's kind of boring a lot of these events. Sit there and watch somebody's PowerPoints. You're sort of snoozing off. So I just trying to bring the fun. That cannabis is serious. Obviously, people get arrested for sure, less now, but there's a whole fun aspect to what our history is about. So my focus often is on movies and television, music, obviously the celebrities, but more recently, I mean, I also wrote this book over here is Pod Culture, but the follow up to that book is Reefer Movie Madness, the
Yeah,
ultimate.
that's the book I have actually. Now that I'm looking about, because
Yeah,
yeah, we were saying you came to Jersey actually after the
right,
24 election. In South
right,
Jersey, we had a little cannabis film festival. It was
right,
interesting. I could
right.
only go to one day though,
And it was enough. That
unfortunately.
was one day was plenty, but yeah, it's sort of my thing at High Times. When I went past the news, went into the music, and then steered into movies. It was a good period, '90s, a really good stoner movie period. Think of Dazed and Confused, The Big Lebowski, Half Baked. There's so many of the best stoner movies ever came out in the '90s and in the 2000s. And now that whole is kind of heading a little. The stoner movie's not like it was, but with legalization, it's changed. But
Yeah.
back then, when it was still illegal, it still had the dudes going on a wild, wacky, wild tour of something, that
Yeah.
Harold and Kumar kind of thing, the Cheech and Chong, which kind of started it, two guys,
Yeah.
adventure.
Yeah, I wanted to make like a movie like that, but yeah, like we've talked about it, like it's very different now, like the nature of it in like a legal society. But we still, I did want to talk about that one battle after another, one like best picture. We have like Leonardo DiCaprio smoking weed in his bowl, and like that's like a really interesting movie. I could definitely see like some of the haters out there. This fucking like drug addict doing it before like he goes in to see his daughter's teacher. But then like you see this is a man who is a refugee from like a fascist dictator and they're police that way. So then it's like that's a lot to be on. So like a lot of pressure to be on. So this is a way to cope, with severe pressure sometimes. And we see like he does try to be like a very responsible father. He's very conservative in that aspect. As like a left wing revolutionary.
Well,
Makes me look like a moderate. It was amusing.
super happy that one battle after another won the Oscar. I was on the edge of my seat because it was the battle between One Battle and Sinners, and I like Sinners, but I like One Battle a lot better, and it's obviously partially because of DiCaprio's role. There's very not that often that a big movie like that has a character like DiCaprio that it's going to go, maybe if he doesn't win the Academy Award, the movie will, and it'll shine a big light on his role. And his role was kind of like a Big Lebowski dude. He was a slacker dude who's a little addled in the head. The famous scene where he can't remember the code, right? And he's going nuts. Then he needs to know the code. How many times does a stoner not remember something they want to remember, right? So it's kind of accurate, pokes a little fun at us, but at the same time, it's funny, and that's part of the sort of the uniqueness of that film. But once I saw that, and I realized that movie was going to be a top movie of the year, was pretty obvious in the greatness of that movie from the very beginning of watching that, whether he was in it or not. But that just added another layer onto it that made it really, worth pushing. And I pushed that movie hard. I was posting every time they won an award, everything, just one battle, one battle. They should give me an award for all the work I did.
Well, you probably could meet Leo at this rate.
I would love that.
We should both meet Leo. It'd be
by the way, Aaliyah has not done one interview discussing how he played that role. So unfortunately, High Times hasn't gone for it.
He's like, I was thinking about these. These celebrities get like too famous, and then they don't want to do anything.
Right.
Like
the thing is that I think if I was at High Times when the movie came out, and I'm doing some stuff for High Times now, and some movie coverage, I might have said, hey, let's use the power of High Times to get DiCaprio. I'm not going to get DiCaprio with CelebStoner, but it could possibly with High Times. But you have to kind of get in there early, not late in the interviews. The film companies like to do advanced stuff and not post after the movie's out. They want to do it all early. So you have you have to see the movie in advance and then know, okay, here's this character, and now we want to do an interview with DiCaprio talking about his role and how he played the stoner. But they're not even doing film screenings anymore. During COVID and stuff, screenings ended. You just have to go to the movie theater and watch it. I go the first week, say a movie like that, where I saw a lot of hype on it, and I figured I got to see this movie right away. But in the past, you would see it in a screening maybe a week before or something, and then you could kind of like maybe get an interview before they closed up the interview window. So anyway, there was no access, to DiCaprio to talk about. Maybe someday somebody will say, "Hey, congratulations on One Battle."
Yeah, we're gonna tag Leo in this video. When we'll see if we can get to talk to Leo.
Leo would have been a good story just in chronicle drugs and movies that Leo's been in. Going back to Basketball Diaries when he played a heroin addict. So.
Oh yeah, I saw that with an X.
Or the beaches, all those different movies or the beach, not beaches, the beach.
The beach. The Wolf of Wall Street has all the drugs.
Of course, Wolf of Wall Street, right, with all the Quaalude stuff and the cocaine. Anyway, we didn't do that, but I'm just saying, I really like to when that times. I love award season, and I hype that relentlessly. You probably see in my newsletter. And whether people like it or not, I do it. I just love I love award shows. I love award season. I know some people don't like award shows; they think it's tacky, whatever. I love it all. and I live for the whole season. I love it, and I watch every show. I watch SAG every show, and especially when I got a movie like One Battle, and you want to see where it's going. And this year, there really was a lot of suspense. I mean, Sinners came this close to knocking off One Battle, this close. I mean, it was.
Yeah, Michael B. Jordan still won. He's from Newark, which is really fun. That's the funny thing is like I thought about like that Sinners party where I guess the vampires here, and it's like I bet there would have been weed at that party. Come on, it's like a party. It's the 30s.
Yeah,
it's like a juke joint. Come on, they don't have weed though, but that like it wasn't explicit, I guess.
By the way, it was a really good competition. Really two really good movies with heavy black themes. And it was really good. For just for the overall communities to dive into. Obviously the black community dove into Sinners, was hoping Sinners would win. Sinners came this close, but One Battle winning was also a victory for a lot of the black actors who were in that movie.
Yeah, no doubt.
Tiana Taylor's reputation really went crazy, and Chase Infinity played the younger woman. And Thomas Paul Anderson is great. And so really happy for him. So use a little bit of the power of the media that I have to just get people focused on something like a movie like that when that comes out. And it just excites me to get behind one movie usually during the Oscar season that you have one character maybe. It was Kieran Culkin 2 years ago. He had the stoner character in a movie, and he won the Best Supporting Actor.
Oh, he did. Oh, I don't even know if I saw that.
In Jesse Eisenberg's movie. I forget the name of that movie, but
yeah, it was like very Jewish where they go like to
right.
See, like,
he went to Poland and they did the tour, and the younger brother brings the weed, and they have these sort of sessions and stuff. He's a little loopy guy, but either way, the stoner characters always play. Who is the stoner character? Usually, we're not the average person. We're a little bit the black sheep. We're the
I'm never average, but to say like I'm never like I say like the character is like a dumb fool is difficult. I can be brilliant, there's always like little details that get difficult, in life in general. Thank you.
People think the stoners are poorly portrayed because of Cheech and Chong. You just
I'm a workaholic here, man, trying to build this thing in like an era of like federal prohibition of marijuana, and then like the shifting sands of fucking media
right
are like insane. Like the trade winds keep changing as I make my ship across the Atlantic. It's intense. But like you've been and seen like the ships and stuff. It's a whole thing of like the nuts and bolts of that versus like the sexiness of like Leo or the fun of the movies. That's always like the thing of like the whole season you can get into of like the awards and like follow that and like being like I guess that I've been at this to get like the Hollywood celebrity thing. I guess I do a lot of stuff in Jersey. I know Jersey people.
Well, I will say though, this year it was also sorted, double-sided, whatever that. In following, One Battle was the movie I followed, on the movie side, and on the TV side or the streaming side, it was The Studio, Seth Rogen's show, which had this, amazingly great mushrooms episode. I don't know if you saw that episode.
No, unfortunately, we have like all the things somehow, but like that one.
That was just fantastic. It's like it's the episode.
I got to download that.
It is the episode of the year for anybody who's a stoner. It's an amazingly funny episode because. Basically, Rogen, who's the studio head, wanted to have an old-fashioned Hollywood party, he was calling it, where they give away, I don't know what he meant, but either way, he bought a bunch of like mushroom chocolates at the beginning of the episode from a friend, and he doesn't understand the dosages. And he puts them out for people just to take, but people don't know what they're eating, and they start getting whacked because he thinks the doses are low. And then Dave Franco, who's in the show, tells him, "You're completely wrong, man. There's no such thing as like whatever. That these are like 7 grams per every like chocolate or something. It's massive doses, and everybody's getting whacked. But it's so funny. It's Chloe.
Right, like you gotta get like a tiny bit of square.
It's just so funny the way people are playing that mushroom stone character, but it's just hysterical. Nobody knows this stuff better than Rogen. So here's a guy from sort of our community, a stoner dude who's now, a big shot in Hollywood. And now he puts through his studio show, which won every award, swept, and part of that was acknowledging the stoniness of that show. By it winning, they're not ignoring the fact that episode 9 was a mushroom episode and blew.
It sells Rogen, like he's kind of like the new era of like the Chong, like the actor that really like leans into it.
Pretty much, pretty much.
He's done a lot actually. He has like a dispensary. He's probably
not dispensaries. He's got Houseplant. He doesn't have a dispensary that I know of, but he's got Houseplant, and Houseplant's an interesting line of products because it's not flour. They have adopted the drinks lately because Rogen had a drinks line up in Canada, so he went back to that with Houseplant. But mostly Houseplants is selling accessories, ashtrays and vases, things, accoutrements for people, stoners who want to have sort of nice stuff, that to go along with their weed. That's really what Houseplant did. It's a very different approach. Most celebrities go in and just try to sell flower, and a few other plant touching products. Rogan has not done that for the most part.
Yeah, there's always like interesting ways. It's like the nature of like the business models, companies, products. It's always like the thing of like cannabis. Like it's this revolutionary thing. It's like really medicinal. It's sacred in like a lot of cultures. This is so great. We're having so much fun. This is a fucking commodity on when it's legit. And then like they made that movie with Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy where they're on Wall Street, and like that's like about commodities. And I was like learning shit. I'm like, ah, fuck. And like I read about John Rockefeller and oil, and I learned so much, and it seemed very similar. My wife loves Hank Hill, who has a couple of weed episodes of King of the Hill, and like one of them though is like the nature of like the propane industry and like the propane operators working too close together to control the price of propane,
Right,
which
right.
is actually an issue in cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
So it's wild. Like learning about these things, going these places, ways. Yes, that's always like interesting about like high times. Like it was like a thing for a while under Forsyth. I guess it was his lawyer Kennedy had it for a while, but then I think Kennedy passed, and then like I guess like it was changing a lot, and like a lot of people like left, like yourself. But now it seems like this guy Josh and Matt Stang are trying to like bring the band back together, and they sort of have.
They have. Matter of fact, I was just out in Arizona interviewing Josh for Rolling Stone. It's an article that's going to come out on 420, and had a great time out there. Toured, the raw facilities. The guy has an empire. In terms of rolling papers. You wouldn't believe the massive amounts of stuff that are in that warehouse. It's just so much shit. And then over at his company corporate offices, which was a lot of fun. He's such a good guy. It's like just the right guy to take over high times. A real true believer with some money in his pocket. And doesn't have to go to investors to have them support it. It's completely. He doesn't need their money. She's just the right guy. And compared to Adam Levine, the guy who kind of brought the company down. A stock guy who kind of destroyed the company to the point where Josh was able to buy it for $3.5 million, which is unbelievable steal for a 50-year brand. So the company was so degraded that Josh was able to get in and steal it. And that was not his plan. He was willing to pay more, but it came down. So he was lucky, he got it. And he's really, I think, the editorials improved. They've relaunched the cup. I know there's one in Jersey happening now.
Yeah, I did was gonna note that. This is some interesting things. I have a lot of flower right now. It's pretty sweet that way. And then there's always controversy around like award shows.
Yeah.
But then there's always probably somebody out there is hating on me, trying to do what I do, and like, some like hating on like little things, but like these things are difficult. It's a whole story.
I mean,
though, the nature of the cup.
I think that they're, doing a good job in the relaunch. I think it was just good news last year that, with all this sort of negative stuff in cannabis that, like a leading legacy brand came back, after having a down period. It kind of showed that, there's, even Josh, he's investing in cannabis. He didn't have to buy this company. He could have saved his money and put it into something else, but he invested in cannabis. As a matter of fact, there's very seldom do our brands get invested in on the media side. If anything, our companies go out of business. They don't stay alive. Look at Green Market Report or whatever. They come and they go.
This is the hottest, wildest hustle. But like, I feel like we're trying to do something that's like important, even though like it's sort of stupid. Like it is weed. Like this does help people.
But we don't.
People have made money on weed. This is an opportunity. We are at the forefront of something like revolutionary, even though like it's fucking hard because of all these problems. Federal prohibition of marijuana, leads to stigma, etc., leads to all these aforementioned ramifications. So it's very difficult.
No, but what I'm saying is that, the media is one of the last places where there is investment in cannabis. I mean, who's buying up media? Who's starting something new? What's the latest big cannabis media brand that's come around? I mean, it's still us. It's still CelebStoner, Marijuana Moment, and Heady NJ. It's and a few other really good sites out there. I give all them credit. Cannabis Business Times, whatever. They're all doing good work. But we're all working very independently and probably not making a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, so squeezing out whatever we can find. So it's kind of tough. The media environment is not great in cannabis.
Not really great in America though. Like I started this, like I was a writer before, and I wanted to have like a blog got respectable as like an instrument versus like I was 20 in '06. I do well. I am a millennial that way. And but like by now, we have like AI, we have like Google boxes, we have like things are different versus like our Instagram, we're big on Instagram, but they fucking hate us.
Right.
They don't like any of like our favorite words, like words, the synonyms, of the sacred herb. Very difficult
Right.
subsequently
Right.
when those are your favorite words.
I mean, lately I'm finding, a few years ago, Facebook was busting me a lot. When we was legalized in New York, I would go to a new store, I'd take a couple of pictures of a menu and maybe, some flour that I bought, and I post it on Facebook, and I'd get banned. You can't do that. No matter whether it's legal in New York now, you can't show stuff. But they've kind of lightened up in the last. I haven't had a suspension in 2 years now. But I was getting constantly. I was like, what did I do wrong now? But they seem. I know people have their issues with Facebook, but they haven't. I haven't had any bans.
Yeah, Facebook has gotten better. Instagram still it's still like fucking with me, and it's really difficult because that's where like I think a lot of the community is on Instagram.
I kind of never really dove into Instagram because I felt it was hard to promote our stuff, as like you and I would put out an article, we want to put out a link, and we want to get people's eyes, and you don't do that in Instagram, right?
Right. They don't really love one. They understand like the idea of a walled gardens. This is like a whole thing. Like I have a whole theory about how like the fascists and like the tech guys actually like in one battle after another in that fucking house with Tony Goldwyn and their fucking politeness and their bougie clothes.
Right.
Like how they fucking hate like the media and like independent like criticism of fascism and fascist movements
Right.
and extremism and right wing things. So then like they hate. So then like they understand this, and then like these companies want to make money. Like a lot of them are just driven by like a fucking money. Versus something like SJW, like noble values, like liberation of the sacred herb, championing small business, descheduling cannabis federally, home gardening here in Jersey.
Right.
It's difficult, these things, but we work bit by bit. So, yeah, so that's always interesting about like the nature of like getting cannabis like in the culture and like covering that as like part of like the aggregate movement. Like you can have like a protest at City Hall and like bring people, maybe like the politicians pay attention to that, but then you put something out in culture, and then it's like you're normalizing it, and then they respond to that.
Well, I consider like the celebrities like sort of a megaphone. I mean, Snoop Dogg's a big megaphone. Every time he puts out something out there, I see a lot of AI Snoop Dogg stuff. I saw a silly thing the other day. He has a joint and he's jumping off a roof onto a trampoline, and then he bangs his head back onto the house but it's all AI. But he's got a joint and it's kind of goofy.
Yeah.
I mean, people like that, they expand the whole movement by the reach that they have. Hopefully they have some interesting things to say, but so that's always why I've kind of hyped a little bit the celebrities, because they have a big impact on what we do and help us actually get to the goals that we want to achieve. And also they're just sort of cool people, a lot of them, and especially the ones who are the biggest, celebrities, stoners, there happen to be some of the most famous stars out there too. Just obviously, Snoop is one of the biggest hip hop.
Yeah, he's like our Bob Dylan in the Complete Unknown movie I was rooting for in the Oscars, along with Dune and Lost last year.
Right. That was a good movie too. But yeah, so I'm just saying.
Bob Dylan movie was awesome. Yeah, because then like you see he's a musician, but then like he becomes part of the civil rights movement by like his songs,
right?
And then does participate in protests,
right?
I think like Snoop has definitely changed like culture that way. The nature of politics in him is another story.
Well, guys like him, they get identified with it, and so every time he's in the news, even when he's on NBC doing the Olympics and stuff, they're making little sort of jokes that are hinting, stoner jokes or whatever he can get away with. It's pushing the envelope step by step, especially dealing with TV censors and what they allow, what they don't allow. Sometimes they'd be kind of careful, but it's big progress to be able to say things that they haven't been able to say a few years ago. And you kind of see that through the celebrities, through TV, through movies, through whatever they say. So I don't know. I just chronicle that. I mean, I did it at High Times, and I was kind of a celebrity chaser at High Times. Who can we put on the cover? Who sells? I over at High Times offices when I was just there the other day. I went through. They had stacks and stacks of the old issues, and Josh said, "Hey, take a look and see, grab stuff you want." And I grabbed a bunch of things. I did that cover. I did that cover. I did that cover. I did a lot. And not that I forget. I remember them all. But I had a big impact there. On the celebrity side, the celebrities weren't a guarantee. A lot of times, put a celebrity on the cover and didn't sell. So we have to be kind
Oh,
of.
really? Who bombed? Oh, I don't know. That's I
Well,
don't know if
like,
we want to talk
I'd say
smack
like
though.
Aaron Lewis from Stain probably was a bomb. That was a Christmas cover when they had a, I mean, you think, oh, but put Stained on the cover? Well, we did. They were hot at the moment, but
If you
so
say so.
maybe that wasn't a good choice. And the Spin Doctors was a poor selling cover, but sometimes it really depends on what they some of the bands, are they going to hold some weed or not? Generally, the rule of thumb at High Times, you have to have a big handful or some smoking thing. Even like Frances McDormand, who was on the cover of High Times, that was an interesting kind of scenario. She was in the movie Laurel Canyon, and the film company Sony Pictures Classics was friends with the owners of High Times, and they contacted the owner, said, "Hey, we got this Stony movie, and we got Frances McDormand in it, and can we put her on the cover?" And she wasn't a likely candidate for High Times, because nobody looked at her as a stoner, but they know her, famously as an Oscar winner. But we went for it, and it's kind of the bosses saying, "Hey, put her on the cover." Okay, I'll never fight a celebrity on the cover. Great. So, but the publicist people are saying, "Well, okay, what can we do to kind of represent weed on the cover with Frances?" And we said, "Well, can she smoke a joint? Can she hold some weed?" No, no, no. They were saying, and then can she wear a weed T-shirt with a leaf or something? Okay, that. So she comes to the photo shoot. We give her this T-shirt, and then she says to us, "Where's the weed?" It's like she didn't care what they were telling her. They were trying to protect her, but she didn't want any protection. She like, "Where's the joint?" And we ended up with a great cover with her with smoking a joint. So if you listen to the publicist, then we never would have had that cover. But it was her.
Yeah.
It was her making the decision. And she came to that photo shoot without a publicist, by herself, because she lives in New York. And usually a star like that would be there with their entourage or whatever,
Yeah.
and they'd be in there telling you what you can and can't do. She was by
Yeah.
herself, and she did what she wanted to do, which was great. That's why I love Frances McDormand. Besides being a great actress, the way she handled that photo shoot for High Times was stellar.
Wait, was that the one lady with Margie in that movie? Wasn't it
Yeah,
that
yeah,
movie?
Fargo, Fargo.
Fargo, right? That's who I thought that was. Yeah, she did that movie
That's
where she was
that's
like
her.
a nomad.
That's her. Yeah, that's right. And yes, and Nomadland, and she won awards for all these. She's
She's
got
like Lebowski adjacent then, I
right,
guess, because that's
right.
the Coen Brothers movie. This is the Coen
Well,
Brothers
she's
movie.
married to one of the Coen brothers, and she was in Blood Simple, which was one of their first movies, which was
Oh, I
great.
didn't see that one. They
It's
have a lot of great
it's
movies. I
real.
love
It's really,
Lebowski
it's
one.
very,
That's like my favorite one
very
of them. They did with Clooney. I love the what's it called? Oh,
yeah,
brother, we're out there when they're in the South. Yes, I love that movie.
right. What's the one? Yeah, I'm forgetting the name right now, but yeah, yeah. I mean, so listen, they made a lot of great movies, but obviously their peak, was The Big Lebowski. Just like for our world, Dazed and Confused is Richard Linklater's peak. Even though Linklater has gone on to make great other movies, but he still is a stoner director, and because that's where his career started. You can leave it behind a little bit and go into more mainstream, but you can never forget where you started. And a lot of these directors, started with stony movies and went off into like more mainstream stuff.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's always like fun, like the nature of that, and like celebrities. Yeah, like I was just reading about Bill Maher. He's a Jersey boy. I got to meet him, but I remember you saying it was like hard to get him on the cover there. I was
Yeah,
reading.
matter
Like
of
really
fact, matter
interesting.
of fact, the LA Magazine ended up doing the cover. We wanted to do it High Times a couple of years ago. Shirley Halpern, who's now the co-editor of High Times, was the co-editor of LA Magazine a couple of years ago, and she worked at High Times with me going back. And so we knew that Mar was always a little tough to get, and she was able to get Mar on the cover with a joint, doing exactly it was I told her. This is the High Times cover we always wanted. Mar's just a little difficult. He there was a normal conference in San Francisco in the 2000s. I was there, and I knew Mar was giving a speech, and I hired a really good photographer, thinking that we could get like some sort of backstage shots with him. And I didn't set it up saying, "Hey, we're going to have a photographer." We just brought somebody there, and once the photographer was there and Mar was there, Mar said, "No, no photos, nothing, no like holding some weed, nothing." He just wouldn't do it. He had a little container like looked like a prescription jar with some weed in it, but he just would not do it. Well, he's being, listen, he was being careful. He's got to deal with his people on his end, and so I sort of understand it, but he was just a little difficult at the time. Mar's attitude was like being in High Times was preaching to the converted, so why bother, And
You don't
so
want to rally you don't want to rally the faithful. Rallying the faithful is always like Luke can be lucrative on its own. Like I
Exactly. Mar was a little. There was a normal event in L.A. that Mar emceed, and it was a good bill with like Be Real and and the Tenacious D, a really fun bill. Marr came out and gave a 15-minute speech, to start, but there wasn't a big crowd. It was poorly advertised, and even though it had a good lineup at a nice Hollywood venue, it was kind of half empty. And Marr didn't like that, and he just left. Like 15 minutes in, and he was done. He wasn't going to MC the rest of the night. He was pissed or something. So he would have these little snits, Marr, about things, and it kind of prevented him from really getting too involved with the movement in terms of normal and this and that, and even being in high times. Whereas we had access to pretty much every major celebrity stoner in those years, so it kind of vexed me a little bit that Marr wouldn't do it. So that's just the way he is. He's come around a bit, and I know Marr's. A lot of people don't like him these days, especially for his Trump stuff, where he had lunch with Trump, and now he's even accepting an award from the Kennedy Center, for the Mark Twain Awards for humor. And this is hard to believe that Marr has agreed to win the award and then give it to Trump. I'm not kidding you. This is not a joke. He has agreed to this. I mean, it's pathetic.
Yeah, this is really difficult when like Conan O'Brien won that, and they made like a whole thing on Netflix about like this following the fascism. I've seen those on PBS. This is like the whole thing. This is like a kind of broad thing about the nature of fascism, that this guy who fucking hates like immigrants and hates everybody and is like ruining America might legalize weed with Schedule 3, but we need descheduling. And I don't even think he's doing the Schedule 3 is a distraction from like all these fucking problems he has.
Well, the DEA is standing in the way, as it always have been. So the DEA is basically messing with Trump now. They mess with Biden, but the thing is, I don't think they can get away with messing with Trump because Trump just doesn't stand for it.
Biden, like if he would impose like his fascism and just be like, okay, we're gonna fucking do this. Go fuck yourself. Like somehow
he's on the record for this. He's promised a lot of his CBD people out there who he's pushing for that he's going to move ahead with this stuff. He also wanted to steal the issue from Biden, which he's done successfully. He's going to do this. It's going to happen. He's not going to let the DEA push him around because Trump doesn't let anybody push him around. And
like I don't know. I heard this Iran deal that like ended the war that almost destroyed the world. It's pretty bad for America, but that's
a whole other. That's a whole other thing. And
the too political and the nature of Trump, and like it's really weird because like I think like cannabis and like this movement about cannabis is always fun because we have like our liberals, progressive socialists that like cannabis weed. We got like Bernie, shout out to Bernie Sanders. And then we got like then we have libertarians. Like a libertarian, a guy wants to have fun, can be like a Republican libertarian. I respect a Republican libertarian. I'll have some fun with some Republican libertarians. They have a lot of views on a lot of other things. I don't need to discuss those views. I feel like I could have Matt Gaetz on this show and like try to discuss just cannabis and not think of him as like some jerk off.
Well, he is very pro cannabis. So I mean, we sort of make exceptions sometimes with people. If they're pro cannabis, we'll accept some other things about them. Maybe not Gaetz. I mean, he couldn't even get into the Trump White House. His record was so bad. He's the only
guy, the one fucking guy I like. Like
the one guy. He's the one guy that didn't get the job that he wanted. Really, under Trump, didn't get the Attorney General, position. Maybe it would have been better than Bondi. But and also Gaetz has sort of a sleazy background with the underage women and that kind of thing hanging over his head, as if Trump is.
That's like the one thing they don't like.
As if Trump is not known for that as well. But so I don't know. I just as far as descheduling, yeah, that's our mantra. Any activist these days, deschedule is a mantra. That's what we want, but doesn't mean we'll get it. And under Trump, I don't think he even understand what that means. So I don't. That's not a possibility under Trump. Dream on.
Yeah. That's the thing about a movement. It takes like a while.
Dream on. So take your victories where you can get it. It's not a great accomplishment that we want, but it's not going backwards. And at least it will treat cannabis as less of a abusive drug, which now it is under the Schedule 1, bad for you, abusive drug, whatever, dangerous. And it'll change the language. And I do think the average person out there who doesn't really have the deep knowledge that we have of cannabis politics, they don't see it the way of we do, of the decrim or the descheduling. They don't even probably know what that means too. The average stoner.
Yeah, it's like it gets technical. I was asking people running for Congress. It's that amusing.
They don't understand the language that we understand. So decrim, deschedule, reschedule. They won't know the difference. They just know that the media is telling them that the government is loosening up its laws and restrictions on weed, and they like that. So I like that change, even if it's benefits Trump or whatever, that he gets the credit, whatever. I just think it's better than nothing, and I'm a little more of a
And that's
centrist.
politics, which is another reason
I'm a
people
little
hate
more
the
of a
game.
centrist when it comes to that kind of stuff. Just incremental change is better than nothing, and accept that. And hopefully, the next time around, when the Dems are back in the White House, they can, move ahead to like deschedule it. But like take the steps. These are the steps that we can get right now. It's even almost surprising, really, to think that Trump even cares at all. That he would even dive into this. So take that as something positive, even if it's Trump giving it to us.
Yeah, yeah, it's the nature of like politics,
You
like a
don't
lot
want to
of
accept
ways. You make a
anything. You don't
deal.
want to accept anything from Trump. He sucks. So if Trump says yes to something, then we want to say no to it. But it's kind of cutting off our nose to spite your face kind of thing. So
Yes, but this is the thing though, Steve, is that like I know like a problem. This is actually Anthony Minetti. Shout out to Anthony Minetti of Camden, the Posicati, sponsoring the film festival. I even have the duck poster behind me, or the goose. And like he's a pharmacist and he understands like Schedule 3, he says is all like the medicine in a pharmacy. And he thought it would really fuck with like the state legal markets. And like I watched on YouTube the video on the White House. I scoured the White House website when like they had like a ceremony with Bobby Kennedy Jr. and some like MSO CEO. This is like the thing about cannabis. It's like the little guy, the underground legacy, the underground legacy to legal. Like all these issues are on one side versus the MSOs, and it's difficult where it's like they're fighting. So the MSO side is closer to the Republicans versus like Bernie and like Democrats closer to like our idea that we have made progress here in Jersey. It's been trench warfare, but we've made progress, so like bit by bit,
yeah,
So under Governor Phil Murphy, now Governor Cheryl, isn't anti-cannabis. We're seeing, her policies emerge and things continue under the CRC.
I mean, there could be a good MSO. Let's say GTI seems to have good policies.
Yeah, some of them are better than others. Like there is that lawsuit that, like in Ohio, where they do say it's a national conspiracy.
Right.
Like I don't think Block is in the conspiracy. Ianthus might be out of the conspiracy. So like that's something. There's a lot of like interesting small MSOs because like this is like a national. Like legacy is like national. Like we need California weed here. Yes, please, thank you.
Right.
Michigan,
Exactly.
like, and then like Oregon weed. I've heard a lot of good things about Oregon weed.
Yeah,
Like I guess, but like we don't have that here, and it's a problem
hopefully,
for them. It's a problem
hopefully in their
for
lifetime,
us.
that this federal ban will end, and we can start moving things around the country legally and have a real economy around cannabis that we really don't quite have yet. It's state by state and whatever each state does. And I constantly keep talking about pricing, compression, and stuff. Where's our compression in New York? Up in Massachusetts, they're $5 a gram, where it's still 15 or whatever. It's like, come on, bring it down. I see the benefits of legalization are two main things. One, stop arresting people and getting people out of jail. And two, dropping the prices so it's affordable. Affordable cannabis, not $50 an eighth. Over with that. Done. And if you can't make any money from $20 eighths, then get out of the business because you have to figure out how to do it. You can't keep gouging people with high prices.
Yeah, it's a big issue here in Jersey. New York is interesting because they think they're moving things even more than us. Is like compare and contrasting we were in our previous episode with Mario Ramos is interesting. Yeah, it's really hard with like 280E. It's hard with like a lot of
How's
things.
his Conbed doing by Yankee Stadium? Are they okay? Are they surviving? Or are they struggling?
Oh yeah, no, I think it's good. It's like a business at the seashore. As long as you get like a good summer season, you can like have like chiller more in the winter. So
Hey, I wish them the best, but I saw Joanne Wilson complaining recently that no store is making any money.
no store's making any money. Is like nobody's making 1 cent. Is that what you really fucking
Well,
mean here? Or are you being
not
like
enough,
one of your fucking metaphors and relative?
not enough to justify all the investment, let's just say, and all the fees and the regulations that they're struggling. That's what she's saying, and she's got great stores. So
Like the red tape sucks, and like it's difficult because now I understand. We have the small businessman we want to champion, protect from the corporations who we want to have thrive like in a descheduled system. But like the thing is, like somebody was telling me, like a lot of the state rules and the prohibition, like champ is allowed to champion small business that way, and then like small business is hard in general. There's so many issues, but then we want to regulate these big businesses. the MSOs because some of them are fucking shady. Like Curaleaf, I've never been to a fucking Curaleaf party. I've never said one nice thing about them and their fucking connections to the fascist dictator Putin.
Right. Well, they're monopoly, so they'll monopolies will get broken
Like
up.
the cartel trust to get technical about like law that way, but that's another
those monopolies will get broken up at some point as they get bigger and bigger. But okay,
oh, knock on wood.
so cannabis has gone through a corporatization period now with the MSOs, and then you have the small players who are the craft players, and there is room for both. Industrial weed for the masses that may not be the best. It's because it's being made for so many people. In huge complex grows. Versus the small grows of 100 plants or whatever at a time for a particular strain that people want or particular brands, and people pay a little bit more. So I'm willing to pay more for the higher end stuff, like you pay for a high proof alcohol or something. You pay more for a better product, and you pay less for something that's a little is made like mass produced. So that's America. That's how we operate. So cannabis is going to operate more or less like that, I think. So there's room for both, but it's also the whole industry has to kind of settle a little bit because it's all still so new. We're watching it from ground up, and what's it going to be in 10 years and 20 years? It's going to be much more advanced, and hopefully they'll take away some of the regulation to prevent advertising and all that stuff, all the stuff they're afraid of catering to kids.
Yeah, we need more people to advertise than Heady NJ. We cannot have any law that prohibits that.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the new
other people. Billboard's another story.
But exactly,
other places another story.
There's all kinds of things we need, lounges and all that kind of stuff. That kind of
we got lounges in Jersey. We're making progress. We got the 2 in Atlantic City, one in South Jersey, Merchantfield. We got one in Newark.
That's great. I mean, that's a national story. You should write about it, and because it's because in New York it's not happening yet, so we're a little bit behind. New Jersey.
This would be a good segue actually. I met Raekwon. You probably met him. He wanted to have a lounge, and then he couldn't even stay open in business. 12 months in Newark.
Right, and that's getting a lot of attention. The failures in New Jersey, but and around the celebrity brands.
Yeah, you ever meet Ice-T?
Yeah, that whole story too. I've followed, obviously I've read everything you've written about that, and I understand, okay, so some of these things work and some don't. It's not like an indictment of celebrities, that sometimes their projects don't work. Just because their name's involved doesn't mean they're going to be successful. Some are going to do it better than others. It's a really good story that came out today in Forbes about, the top 37 cannabis celebrity brands. And there's a lot that haven't made it, and there's a lot that, a bunch that have. And so it's like, they kind of gave an insight of like, hey, at least half the celebrity brands that have been, come out over the last few years are not active anymore. So
yeah, I could have, I should have gotten down to see Jim Belushi in South Jersey last year. He still appreciated the story. Because they brought his stuff. I liked him because he was on TV. Like we're talking, like my uncle, regular guy, was appreciating like that show about cannabis on like the Discovery Channel.
Yeah, his show. I mean, that helped promote, his business to say the least. I mean, he had like a national, spotlight on him. So that was great for him. That show kind of went, I think, 3 seasons and no more. But the thing with Belushi's a real gregarious guy who likes to meet people, be in the public. He's a blues brother. He's a performer. And he's a really nice guy. I've interviewed him several times. A really nice guy, and he really is a believer. And people wonder, why is Jim Belushi involved? What did he do? When things were illegal. Who cares? The guy's into it now, and he's investing, and he's doing it in his way, and he's not like a big player, and he's become one of the best known celebrity brands. So good for him. That's what it takes. It takes that one guy to go out there and promote the crap out of it. If you can't wait for somebody else to do, they want to see the celebrity behind it, because that's the whole idea of the celebrity brand. Go out and do meet and greets, which he does all the time, like you were saying in Jersey. Go do that stuff. That's how you'll build your brand, as a celebrity. Don't expect your name to carry when you're not there. People.
Yeah.
You got to show up.
Yeah, like actually Charlemagne the God, these other people involved in Raekwon. Yeah.
Cheech and Chong do it all the time too. When they open a new store, they're there, and they're aging. Tommy John's going to be 88 this year, and they're still going.
Jesus Christ, God bless him in heaven. I met him, or God bless him in real life. Oh my God, yes, because I had the honor of meeting him with you. I got a picture with him. I met Cheech the following year, but I was like, I took a picture of him. We didn't get like a selfie together or something like that.
Yeah, I remember when we were hanging out.
Where I got with Sean was pretty sweet.
I remember when we were hanging out that day, the day I was supposed to interview Tommy for the crowd.
Oh.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, but I'm just saying that's what it takes. I mean, you have to, like Rogan, he's putting out an ad or an email twice a week promoting his product line with always his face in it. Here's my latest thing. Here it is in his hand. Latest thing.
Yeah, he's like more involved. I gotta meet him. He's
That's the thing
because
too. The
he's
celebrity has to have their face involved in it. They can't stand back. They have to dive in. If they don't, they're not going to make it.
yeah, it was Ice-T's dispensary, the medicine woman. So like he like met some people and they had a
And I
dispensary.
doubt he was there. He was there for the rollout and probably never came back. So, or maybe once or twice, but he's not there regularly to promote the shit out of it.
Yeah, it's not like you're like helming the wheel, or I guess like at the wheel,
And
like
a guy
working the
like him,
door or like in
is
town.
the thing like him, a guy like him who's not a smoker makes it a little harder because he's not going to really go full tilt in favor of smoking and whatever, like a Snoop Dogg thing. Hey, come to my store.
Right, that's the other weird thing about it is that he's not like that. Versus like, oh, if somebody's like, I smoked in the DL. I wanted to get famous, so I kept it quiet. Now it's great. Come on, guys.
Well, that's not a formula for success for a celebrity brand to be a non-smoker. I mean, I'm not saying you have to be, but it's just not going to work as well for you. And I guess it's proven that whatever the bad business they had there as well. But so even in talking about this, I don't really think about it that much generally, like what makes a celeb brand work. But I really do think it's being there in person and using your face and your name to get people's attention. You can't hide. You got to be.
Yeah.
Wiz Khalifa, one of the most popular cannabis brands, he's out front, constantly promoting his brand. So you got to do that. I mean, the problem with Garcia, which is a very popular brand.
You were saying about Wiz Khalifa.
Yeah, I mean, Wiz Khalifa is a great example of somebody who does a good job as a celebrity brand, leader. And he has a number one brand because of it. I mean, Wiz has got problems. He's still facing, a charge, a conviction in Romania, of all places. And an interesting story as to what will happen. I guess they haven't made an effort to extradite him, and I doubt the U.S. would send him over. Trump has always been pretty friendly to rappers, so I doubt he's going to send Wiz Khalifa over to Romania to serve a sentence. But
gangsters respect other gangsters.
Yeah, he has. I mean, Snoop Dogg loves him because he pardoned like one of the guys, the founders of Death Row Records. Had a bad.
He did pardon like a few guys. This one guy, what was the name of that one guy? I met him. He had been like in jail in Jersey, in federal jail. David Holland was the lawyer.
He's especially pardoned a lot of rappers. It kind of endeared him a little bit with the hip hop community. And people don't like that Snoop likes him, but Snoop actually played a Trump inauguration event.
Yeah, no, that's definitely difficult that way. The nature of like Snoop and his politics. Like I know there was like the Buzz Lightyear movie with like a lesbian, and he didn't like that. But then like she was black too.
Yeah, but I don't know.
We didn't need to have any black characters in any of these movies, so then it's difficult. And then it's like a difficult thing to say, and like it's difficult like a representation conversation. I'm a progressive here, but there's a lot of hella issues in America right now versus like cannabis and bringing people together and centering around like the sacred herb.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah. So, I think actually this might be near like a good place. We've been at this a good amount of time.
Sure.
Very happy to have you, Steve. All your great experiences talking about music and cannabis and celebrities.
Sure.
The business of high times and like being in media and like you did edit like a story for me or when I was a freelancer and very young in this thing.
Yeah.
So that was like something, and like, I do appreciate that. And I was probably a little foolish then.
Well, you knocked on.
Ideally, I've learned some stuff by now.
You knocked on my door when I was editor of Freedom League.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, fun times there.
That's pretty much my last print work. I did a couple of like one-off print magazine editing after that, but I haven't done any print in a while. So Freedom Week was my last shot at that for the most part. It was a good little company, but they kind of went belly up.
Yeah, ink is very hard out here that way. Like we can have like on your phone, you can read Heady in the streets, smoking a joint. You could have people reading it in the State House, learning about the politics of home grow. A displeasure at the impediment of home gardening in the Garden State, big issue. And then we have business people like reading it, doing like trying to have their own business in the industry, ancillaries, like lawyers, accountants. So it's always fun. I love everybody that smokes weed. That we can have a community together, bring people together. This is why it's so much better than booze and like fucking heroin. All that shit. Pills. Oh my God. Yeah.
You've done a good job in New Jersey. I hope you can, monetize it in a way that works for you. But you kind of have the market somewhat to yourself, not too much other coverage of cannabis, some of the newspapers for sure. But, you've done a good job in New Jersey. Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. No, it's been a wild ride. And like sometimes it has been like we're fighting in like a midst of storm or with our backs to the walls. But you can take breaks. We make progress bit by bit. It's interesting seeing like the other media. There's a lot of like content creators like bit by bit, but like I am a journalist and like have like covered City Hall and I've covered protests and a lot of that big stuff and politicians. So like I know like the nuts and bolts of research and things like that. And it's always interesting, videos, trying to do more videos. And then, like, the mainstream, sometimes they'll cover, like, the big things. Like, if they know a guy, they want to, like, a lot of big celebrities, they want to talk to, like, NJ.com. They want to talk to, an established
Right.
outlet versus humble old me and
Right.
my, unique
A
office and
little
hat.
harder to get. You got to work your own contacts to make some of that something happen, especially locally. You could deal with, the more local celebrities, the rappers, the Red Man, people like that.
Oh, yeah, I met Redman. Shout out to Redman. I'm trying to see what he was trying to do. Al Harrington is another Jersey boy, has a
Right.
dispensary in Hoboken. Hell of a thing. But although I met him, he seemed like a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
Typical of the nature of them. There's so many like issues with like the nature of trying to have a dispensary, this wild dream. But we make progress bit by bit.
Well, I will say, even though the media is a tough environment for us to make decent livings, some doors have opened up lately for me. In the last few months, I've written for High Times again for the first time in a long time, over close to 20 years, and I'm starting to write for the Other magazine, Peter Shafran's publication. They've asked me to do monthly articles, and I'm also writing for Rolling Stone, where did I wrote for in the 80s before I ever worked for High Times. And my friend Shirley Halpern is the co-editor now. She's the co-author of this book with me, the podcast.
Oh, sweet. Well, you could tell her I was just admiring the 40th anniversary cover in that edition that came out in '07.
Mm-hmm.
Reading about Bob Dylan and the nature of like him and his politics and
Yeah.
going apolitical rock versus very political folk. It seemed like a really interesting thing, and the whole Newport shit.
Yeah. Fascinating. So yeah, so that's where I'm at, and the people want to find me obviously via CelebStoner. I've kind of switched over. And I'm not sure if you're really aware of this, but I really have switched most of my content over to Patreon. CelebStoner is getting a little old. The website, it's kind of a little creaky. So it's got pretty much is there to provide the old stories that people want to look up. You got 15 years of stories there that cover, what's been happening for that period of time. And some stories get still read. People go back, and I noticed recently the Dave's Not Here story I did about Cheech and Chong was suddenly getting a lot of hits. Why? I don't know. Somebody
It's the holiday season. We have the traditional holiday coming up.
out of the blue, things happen, and so you just But so that site is less active because I'm posting less there, and I'm posting more at Patreon, which is the home of the CelebStoner newsletter, and then other news stories that I'll post as well at Patreon rather than CelebStoner. Though I mix it up. It just depends. I just did a review of a book that was requested to be not a review, an excerpt from a book about a former Yippie activist, a woman named Nancy Kershon. And so they offered me an excerpt from the book, and so they obviously wanted it in CelebStoner, not Patreon. So I'll use CelebStoner for things I want to use it for, but I'm kind of mixing it up now because honestly, I don't really get much advertising at CelebStoner anymore, but I do make money at Patreon. So I'm trying.
Yeah, it's always been trying to figure out like a business model, the nature of it, like looking into products, paywalls. It's difficult. We had a friendly rival that had like a very high paywall, and they were like all buddy with them themselves. But then things got complicated now. But now they're not a thing anymore anyway.
Well, the thing for you now, being a podcaster, is a lot of podcasters use Patreon, and it's for creators. And so you could tease this interview with me. Take a highlight and then say for the rest of the interview, pay. And I won't have a problem with that. By the way, I don't care whether less people are going to see it. Also, they don't have.
Yeah, that's always the interesting.
Also, they don't have to pay. At least they're going to let them in for free as a free member, which I do. Or the only time anything that I post except the newsletter is free, but I do put the paywall up for the newsletter because I want to bring people in. I think the newsletter is the most valuable thing that I provide at Patreon. So,
yeah.
So I
think we're at time here. I'm sorry. We're at time here, and it was great having you here and having this conversation. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Dan.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.